first large-scale attack since the failed raid on Villers-Bocage on June 13th, the aim of this offensive was to breach the German defences west of Caen, cross the Odon Valley and capture Hill 112, located between the Odon and Orne rivers. From the Odon bridgehead, the tanks would then cross the Orne in order to pursue their advance as far as the main road to Falaise. Meanwhile, an army corps would set off from the salient east of the Orne to complete the movement of encirclement. On June 26th, just as the Americans were taking control of Cherbourg, an army of 60,000 soldiers, backed up by 600 tanks, engaged in the fierce Battle of the Odon in the Cher sector. After advancing a few kilometres in the driving rain, the attackers met with fierce German resistance. Incredibly violent fighting ensued in the narrow Odon Valley and on Hill 112, which was captured by flame-throwing tanks. On June 30th, after abandoning the aggressive rise, Montgomery brought this costly operation to an end. The battle had failed to achieve its objectives, but by taking the initiative, Montgomery had at least forced Rommel to abandon his planned counterattack. Overall, June had been an encouraging month. On D+24, the Allies' situation in the bridgehead was generally satisfactory, and there seemed to be no reason why the final victory should not be theirs. The US Navy had set about demining the port of Cherbourg. Work on constructing the Mulberry Harbour was continuing, despite massive damage caused by the Great Storm. Nearly 20 airfields were in service. The threat of a counterattack seemed to have been averted for the time being, and the presence of the liberating armies had prompted French resistance workers to emerge from the shadows and lend their active support to the Allied effort. The only problems remained the city of Caen, which was still in German hands. The narrowness and overcrowding of the bridgehead, especially in the British sector, and, for the RAF, the inaccessibility of the vast plains south of Caen, which were eminently suitable for large airfields. According to the Overlord plan, after capturing Cherbourg, the 1st American Army was supposed to mount an offensive in the Cotentin Peninsula in the direction of Avranches, while at the other end of the front, the British were supposed to push hard towards Caen, taking care of the panzer divisions. After crossing the marshy pastures of central Cotentin, the Americans found themselves in the Bocage, a network of tiny fields and hedgerows, where German grenadiers and paratroops lay in wait in every sunken lane and behind every embankment, determined not to yield an inch. In this dense vegetation, ideal for guerrilla warfare, the horizon blocked by natural obstacles, the First Army was forced to engage in a war of attrition, reminiscent of 1914-18 trench warfare. The Americans suffered appallingly and sustained their highest losses in the whole of the European campaign in exchange for negligible gains. The only noteworthy advance during these discouraging weeks was the capture of Saint-Lô. Bombarded on several occasions, this small provincial town, lying at the junction of several major roads to the south, had been reduced to a field of rubble by the time its liberators arrived. While the Americans were being installed in the Bocage, the Second British Army launched an attack on Caen. This resulted in the capture of Carpiquet Aerodrome by the Canadians, and following heavy bombing in the evening of July 7th of the western half of the city itself. The old city was swallowed up in this deluge of fire, along with most of its monuments, and yet, despite the destructive nature of this liberation, its long-suffering inhabitants greeted their liberators as warmly as those elsewhere, displaying no feelings of resentment. By mid-July, Eisenhower had become extremely worried by the lack of progress on the Normandy front. The breakthrough launched by Bradley was becoming bogged down